Joining us on TheInformer, a young guy called Tom Ravlic, who's written a number of books, a couple that I want to focus on today. In his time, he's been a reporter, a columnist, but today we're talking to him as author of two tomes. One is called Rorts and Rip-Offs, which I think is the latest managed bit of specialty work that he's really enjoyed writing, or maybe he hasn't, I'll find out in just a moment. And the other one is Vulture City, which talks about how our banks, or our bankers, got rich on a bundle of swindles. And of course, much of this has been written since the Royal Commission into banks. Tom Ravlic, welcome to The Informer.
Thanks for having me on board, George.
Tom, when did the gestation of these books start to take shape?
Okay, Vulture City, which is it follows the Hayne Royal Commission, you're right. That began to take shape during the early part of 2019 as we were pulling it together after the release of the final report. So for the first half of 2019, most of my time was spent dissecting the innards of different, particularly terrible case studies, actually.
Were you stunned by it? Were you stunned by what you discovered?
I've always been conscious that there's been misconduct in the financial services sector. Over my career, I've both been a journalist, but also worked in professional bodies, George. So I've seen what people have done to accountants' clients when accountants who are members of the bodies I've worked for told me about problems that they've had over the years. So I came to writing Vulture City with already having a body of knowledge about what people were capable of doing. The publisher, Michael Wilkinson, was quite keen on me having a look at it. I'd dealt with Michael since the late mid-90s, actually. About 1995 was when he appointed me as a scruffy little skinny lad in his early 20s as a editor of an accounting newsletter called Chartered Accountancy News. So Vulture City brought Michael and I back on some familiar ground. So the book started there, and part of the book also deals with, you would have noticed, criminological theory and other bits and pieces up front. And that in part was because the Hayne Royal Commission paralleled what I was doing in my studies through Charles Sturt University.
Yeah.
I graduated last year with a master's in fraud and financial crime. So a part of the book actually benefits from the work I was doing for that.
Now, don't tell them too much because I want them to buy the books. Tom, I want them to buy the books. So that's Vulture City. So it really gave you a chance to get your teeth into it. But you've followed up with Rorts and Rip-Offs. Come on, let out a bit of steam here and tell me, why did you get so excited and feel that there was another book right almost behind the other one? Because we're talking 2019 and we're only 2020.
Yeah, so it's the second book in as many years. You're right. What the publisher came to me and said was, look, we need to do something that's consumer driven. That's driven to explaining what people can do to avoid falling into the potholes that are presented when there are scammers and swindlers and shysters around the place. I kind of like alliteration; it works. But
so what are the big scams?
Okay, well, if we look at what the ACCC has found, the key areas of activity that most cause people heartburn when it comes to their finances are investment scams, romance scams, that is, things that happen, either through contact via online dating sites or through other means, and also the kind of billing scams that occur when people are sent invoices that they don't need to pay, but they happen to pay for some kind of reason. So you've got a whole raft of individual scams that sit within those categories. And the concerning thing is, irrespective of the fact that scammers use the same techniques, they just tweak it with different labels. They just tweak it in different circumstances, and people still fall for them.
That's incredible. That's incredible. That it tells you more about human nature than anything else. But why aren't our banks and other organisations across much of the information that you are and looking to put or provide more safeguards?
Well, the issue, if I can step back and look at the banks for a moment, George, one of the things that you'll notice in Vulture City and in Rorts and Ripoffs, there's an interesting dichotomy there. On the one hand, the banks created a problem with incentives and performance-based payment. In other words, selling became the driver rather than due care and responsibility towards the actual client. Interestingly, during the recent period leading up to the federal budget, what we've also had is Josh Frydenberg lessening the responsible lending obligations on banks. So we're probably going to see another Royal Commission as a result of that lessening, because people are probably going to enter into loans they can't afford as interest rates come back and then they start building up over time. That's interesting. The other side to all of this is banks, George, have actually got advice for people who are caught up by buying stuff online, and they happen to be dudded by a person who's a scammer. They actually provide instructions to people how to get that money back, if it's at all possible, because by the time they realise they've been scammed, guess what happens?
It's gone.
The money might hit a scammer's account. So you've got a chain of events that occurs. It goes from the customer's account to a dummy account, if you like, and it can end up in any jurisdiction in the world. The best way to stop that is for people to be aware of what's going on and understand what's going on and ask for questions about what's going on.
And that probably dovetails beautifully into why you've written the books, to give people a bit of an idea, in fact more than just a bit of an idea, but to open our eyes to some of the shenanigans and transactions that go on behind the scenes, and to also keep people like they've never thought of before, be aware, but more importantly, by being aware, be prepared. So are they the lessons, the key lessons that you want people to drag from both these books?
Primarily from Rorts and Ripoffs, the key message is the one you've articulated. The first thing people need to do is be absolutely conscious that they are being in a position where they are in control of their money. They don't need to let it go.
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear.
It's theirs. I mean, even when they're talking to potential advisors, there are things they can do to assure themselves that someone is actually a legitimate advisor or a legitimate tax agent. I cover that in Rorts and Ripoffs in some detail, because my concern has always been that there are people who are backyard operators who are underqualified, who provide people with rather loose tax advice, and they end up acting on it. Now, we do have legal protections in place. We do have professional associations that provide a framework for training for individuals who are accountants. I'm a member of an accounting body, but I sure as hell can't do your tax, George, because I'm not registered as a tax agent.
Wow.
So if somebody comes to me and asks me, oh, how about you look at this tax issue for me? I can't do it from the point of view of the tax law, from the point of view of the provision of taxation services, because I'm not registered to do it. The flip side, as a journalist,
yep,
I can write about it, but that is written as a general overview of what the tax law does. There's a big difference between the provision of advice and writing about it.
And you've done a fantastic job giving people a real look behind the scenes. As I started this interview, I remember saying to you at the very beginning, what I liked very much was that you managed to do something quite extraordinary. That was lift the veil and give us a glimpse of what's been going on behind the scenes. The two books, the latest one is Rorts and Rip-Offs, and the first book that he wrote last year is called Vulture City. The man is Tom Ravlic. If you get a chance, Christmas is just around the corner. We recommend them both. Not only good reads, but a real warning about what's out there and how we need to prepare. Tom Ravlic, thank you very much for joining us on The Informer.
Thank you for having me, George.
Pleasure, mate.